I've never been the kind of person who makes enemies. I go to work, I do my job, I keep my head down and my record clean. That's how I've operated for 6 years at the district school board office. 6 years of budget reports, audit cycles, and bureaucratic meetings that could put anyone to sleep. I was not flashy. I was not political. I was just good at what I did. And for 6 years, that was enough. Until the day I walked into the office and felt something shift. Something quiet and invisible, like the air in the room had changed overnight. People I said good morning to every single day suddenly found reasons to look away. My supervisor gave me a tight, uncomfortable smile, and my coworker Derek, the man I'd sat across from for 3 years, looked at me like I was already finished. I didn't know it yet, but someone had already started building a case against me, and it wasn't the truth. Let me give you a little background on where I worked, because it matters. The school board administrative office isn't exactly thrilling. We managed procurement, vendor contracts, payroll approvals, facilities budgets, the kind of financial infrastructure that keeps a large public school district running. Hundreds of millions of dollars flow through that office every year, and the people who process those transactions have to be meticulous, absolutely meticulous. I was a senior budget analyst. I'd been promoted twice in 6 years. My audits were clean, my documentation was always airtight. My supervisor, a woman named Brenda, had told me point blank during my last review that I was being considered for the deputy finance director position, a role that had been open for almost a year. I was quietly excited. I didn't tell anyone, I just kept working. Derek was the other finalist. Now, Derek was a different kind of employee. He was charming, the kind of guy who remembered everyone's birthday, brought donuts on Fridays, and always had the right thing to say to the right person at the right moment. Brenda loved him. The superintendent adored him. He had a gift for making powerful people feel comfortable, and he used that gift constantly. What Derek was not, though, was particularly careful with numbers. I noticed small things over the years. A vendor invoice that seemed slightly inflated, a reimbursement request that didn't quite match the attached receipt, a budget line item that quietly disappeared from one quarterly report to the next. Nothing I could prove, nothing I could point to with certainty, but things that made me uneasy. I filed it away in the back of my mind. I kept my head down, I kept my work clean. And then the district announced an independent financial audit. The moment that announcement hit the office, something changed in Derek. The donuts stopped, the easy smile tightened. He started working late, which was unusual because Derek was famously the first one out the door at 5 o'clock. I'd pass his office on my way to the parking lot and see him hunched over his computer, clicking fast, pulling up files, doing something. I didn't think much of it at first. Audits make everyone nervous. Even people with nothing to hide start double-checking their work when outside reviewers are coming in. But then the rumors started. It began as whispers, little fragments of conversation that went quiet whenever I walked into a break room or down a hallway, a look exchanged between two colleagues that lasted a half second too long. And then one afternoon, a woman I was friendly with, Janet from payroll, pulled me aside near the copy room and said, very quietly, "Marcus, people are saying some things. I thought you should know." She wouldn't tell me what things. She looked genuinely uncomfortable and walked away before I could ask a follow-up question. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every report I'd filed, every transaction I'd touched, every decision I'd made in the past 2 years. I knew my work was clean. I knew it. But something was very wrong, and I could feel it pressing in from every direction. I got up at 2 in the morning, made coffee, and opened my laptop, and I started looking. It took me 3 days of careful, quiet digging to understand what Derek had done. Over the course of 18 months, he had been skimming funds from a discretionary vendor account, a budget line that was relatively low oversight, used for emergency facilities repairs and last-minute supply orders. The amounts were small individually, a few $100s here, 1,000 there, but they added up. Over time, they added up to something significant. And when the audit was announced, he had gone back and altered the digital paper trail. He hadn't erased it, he'd redirected it. Several transactions that he personally processed and approved now had my employee ID attached to them, pulled in through a shared access protocol we used for collaborative budget reviews. He had exploited a loophole in our system's logging structure, one that allowed a secondary user to be associated with a file without having formally edited it. It was clever. It was genuinely clever. If an auditor ran a surface-level search for my employee ID on those vendor files, my name would appear. And in a room full of suits looking for someone to blame, a name appearing on suspicious documents is often enough to end a career before anyone asks a single question. Derek had spent 6 years learning how this office worked. He knew how audits were conducted. He knew what investigators looked for, and he knew that I was the other candidate for the promotion. If I went down, he moved up. Simple as that. I sat with that knowledge for a long moment. I didn't panic. I didn't storm into his office. I didn't send a furious email or pull Brenda aside and start making accusations. I thought about it quietly and carefully, the same way I approached every budget discrepancy I'd ever reviewed. And then I got back to work. Here's what Derek didn't count on. He was good at charm. He was good at office politics. He was good at making powerful people feel comfortable. But I was good at data. Specifically, I was good at understanding the difference between what a system shows you and what actually happened inside it. I had spent 6 years in financial analysis. I understood metadata. I understood log structures. I understood that every digital action inside our database left a trace, not just a surface entry, but a timestamp trail buried 3 layers deep that most people never bothered to look at. The surface log showed my employee ID associated with those files, but the deep access log, the one that tracked actual keystrokes, active session windows, and authentication tokens, told a completely different story. My credentials had never been used to actively open or modify those files. My ID was passively pulled in through the shared access protocol, exactly as I suspected, and the active session that made every single one of those alterations belonged to one login, Derek's. I documented everything. Every timestamp, every session record, every authentication token. I cross-referenced the altered transactions against the original vendor receipts I pulled from archived emails. I built a clean, organized, airtight file, the same way I would have built any audit submission, and I saved it in 3 separate places. Then I requested a private meeting with the superintendent. His name was Dr. Raymond Holt. He was a careful, methodical man, and when I walked into his office with a printed summary and a USB drive, he looked at me with the kind of cautious neutrality that powerful people use when they've already heard something that made them suspicious of you. Derek had gotten to him first. I could see it. I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "Before the audit team reviews any files connected to my name, I'd like to show you something." I walked him through it, calmly, methodically. The surface discrepancies, the redirected transactions, the deep access logs, the authentication trail, the timestamps that placed every single alteration squarely within Derek's active sessions, including one at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, long after the audit was announced, long before the rest of us had gone home. Dr. Raymond Holt did not say a word for a very long time. Then he picked up his phone and called the head of IT security. 40 minutes later, Derek was called into that same office. I was asked to wait in the hallway. I sat in a chair outside the door and listened to the kind of silence that only exists when something irreversible is happening on the other side of it. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. When the door opened, Derek walked out ahead of an HR representative and a security officer. He didn't look at me, not once. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, face completely blank, and walked out of the building he had spent years charming his way through. He was escorted to his car, his key card was deactivated before he reached the parking lot, and that was the last time I ever saw him. The independent audit came and went without incident. My records were clean, which I known they would be. The investigators flagged the same discrepancies I had already identified and confirmed the same authentication trail I had documented. Derek was terminated for cause, and the case was referred to the district's legal department for potential prosecution. 2 weeks later, Brenda called me into her office. The deputy finance director position was mine. I accepted it quietly. I didn't make a speech. I didn't tell anyone about what happened in those 3 sleepless days of digging through log files and metadata. I just said thank you and shook her hand and went back to my desk. But I want to be honest with you about something. There was a moment sitting in that hallway, waiting outside Dr. Holt's door, listening to that silence, where I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction exactly, not relief, something quieter. It was the feeling of knowing that doing your job with integrity year after year, day after day, when nobody's watching and nothing exciting is happening, actually means something. Because when someone finally comes for you, you have something to stand on. Derek had charm, he had connections, he had a plan. But I had the receipts. And in an office built on numbers, the receipts always win. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been passed over, undermined, or betrayed by someone who smiled to your face, drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning.